to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And we're going to jump right into it. On the back half of this episode, we're going to be having an exciting interview. Joel, you want to talk a little bit about that, kind of tease it coming up?
Yeah, one of my oldest friends in the world, Derek Weed, he's a financial advisor and a Jesus follower in the sector of finance, and he's just brilliant the way he thinks about the world and thinks about how he lives in it as part of God's kingdom, and love him a lot, so I'm excited to laugh with him and talk about money. He is my own personal Wolf of Wall Street, and he's going to hate that I said that. Yeah. But that's not really him, but I love him so much.
Yeah, but that'll be in the back half of the episode, so we're going to jump right into our first article. This is an article from the website Church Leaders. It's by Jesse T. Jackson, and it says, "Not Desiring God." This is John Piper's son criticizing his upbringing to 925,000 TikTok followers. It is now over 1 million followers last time I checked.
Woza.
Yeah. I can't imagine having that many people watching.
Carrying what you have to say. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's a quick summary on that. John Piper, he is a well-known Christian author, theologian, and pastor. His son, on the other hand, is well-known in his own regard. Abraham Piper is a TikTok creator who posts videos criticizing his Christian upbringing, along with criticism of fundamentalist evangelical worldviews. Abraham now has over 1 million followers on TikTok. He encourages people to look critically at religion and their churches in a snarky and sometimes vulgar fashion. Here's a couple of his more recent videos.
When the Bible says, believe in Jesus or you'll be condemned, it's saying, doubt him. And it threatens you if you don't. Because when you say you believe something, you're saying it may not be true. Why would you have to believe anything if you actually had access to the truth? You don't believe things that you know. Now, there's nothing wrong with believing, obviously, but it seems relevant to acknowledge that when you believe something, you're showing that you actually doubt it. So when the Bible says, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, that command carries inside it the admission that maybe you shouldn't. I was at a coffee shop yesterday. Happened to sit down by two guys who were talking about Jesus. One was very obviously the mentor, the other the mentee. The one said, so what should I do? We've had all this conversation. I'm trying to be a better believer. Like, what's the next thing I should do to keep things moving forward? How do I make sure something happens from all this? And then the mentor says, just keep trusting. That last thing was what bugged me the most. Because, dude, that's not a next action. I saw an article yesterday from a conservative Christian about the idea of deconstruction. To summarize one of their points, if you're going to deconstruct, you should do it carefully, taking the faith seriously. To which I say, no? Why? In order for there to be an obligation to take anything seriously, there has to be an obligation to take everything seriously, because you have to take everything seriously in order to determine what one thing you're going to take seriously. Someone called up this author and was like, I no longer want to be a Muslim. I'm converting to Christianity. Would this author say, okay, but make sure you take the faith of Islam seriously on your way out the door? No. They don't want anything taken seriously but themselves.
Now, those are a few of his calmer videos. In a lot of his other ones, there's cussing and a lot more criticism involved. I think some of his criticism in those videos, some of it was valid, but a lot of it is just him picking at small things that he's noticed in different churches or different Christians.
Just not a very happy guy.
No.
Chip on his shoulder in that way. But like you said, he's got some validity to it, and a lot of people are listening. And I think that's an important thing for us to note. A lot of people are listening and connecting with the chip on his shoulder and sort of the anger and angst he has towards religion and the Church of Jesus.
Yeah. So does it surprise you that someone as influential in Christian circles as John Piper has a child who wants nothing to do with Christianity now?
Not for me personally,
Yeah,
no. And I keep thinking, at being a pastor myself, praying for our two little boys. We have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, being their pastors' kids, their PKs, and pastors' kids, missionaries' kids, they see the inside, the ugliness of, how church can be and how people can be to them. And they've seen sort of how the sausage is made, and they can really, repel from that, to go away from that. So I think, someone who's as influential Christian celebrity like John Piper, they probably saw some gross stuff that happened there. They saw some hard stuff that happened there, and they probably don't want to have anything to do with it. Maybe I could understand that. And then also, John Piper he's a very hard line with a lot of his theology and a lot of his teaching, on that fundamentalist line, to where, people repel against that, and you see people run the opposite direction from that a lot, especially if it was your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, I don't think it's too shocking necessarily, because just because your dad has a very strong belief or faith or whatever relationship, that biblical truth that you learn growing up doesn't necessarily become your own. So you have to walk your own walk and find your own faith and your own relationship, and ask your own questions, and, wrestle with your own doubts and these kinds of things. It has to be your own. So just because your dad is this influential, religious leader, doesn't mean that that's who you are going to be. You have to figure that out for yourself. So
yeah.
And isn't that something, I'm sorry, that something that we all want for our own kids,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
And something that could be powerful. I know it was powerful in my journey to have my own faith. And Abby, you've talked about that before too, because your dad's a pastor.
Yeah. And I think for me, I don't find it very surprising, because there's so many times where you see how fake. I'm not saying that John Piper, I forgot his first name for a second, that John Piper is fake, but I think that we see so often where these influential Christian leaders can be a completely different person on stage than they are at home.
Sure.
And so it could have, situations like that where, he sees his dad be one way on stage and different at home.
Anything is possible.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
People are human, and we're all flawed. So you just never know.
So what are your thoughts on deconstruction? A lot of his videos focus around that and encourage deconstruction. What are your thoughts about people deconstructing their Christian faith?
Oh, so many. This is just such a
say.
cultural moment that we're in right now. I mean, if you're on the internet, or I guess you're probably on the internet if you're listening to this, but if you're on social media and Twitter, I mean, there's this whole movement called #exvangelical, #exvangelical. Or Church 2, where people are explaining some of their church hurts and why they're moving away from evangelicalism. It's just this moment right now where a lot of people are, tearing down, deconstructing the faith that they were handed, because there's some brokenness inside of it, or something is not computing with the way that they see their neighbors and they see the world around them. And overall, I can be encouraged by people walking towards deconstruction overall, because I know people that they're doing the work, they're trying to figure out what this ancient faith looks like in 2022 and beyond. They're asking questions, and for me and for us at the church here at Bridgeway, we actually encourage asking questions and expressing doubts. We go as far to say almost every service that having doubts and questions is not the enemy of your faith, but silence can be the enemy of your faith. You need a place to ask these questions, and a lot of times it can help us grow to a deeper place of trust and a deeper understanding, because the questions that you're asking, you're probably not the first person that's asked them. And I think also I have a mentor in my life who says that a faith that can't be questioned isn't any good. If you're saying you can't ask questions, what does that say about the validity?
Right.
What does that say about the strength of your faith system and your value system? So I would say, if you're wrestling with the scriptures, wrestling with the church and understanding what it means to follow Jesus, you're in a good place. And I would just encourage you to find a faith community that doesn't shush your questions, doesn't push you down, but says, hey, let's have a safe place for conversation to do this. For me, some of the hardest parts of deconstruction are Christian leaders and faith communities that are very defensive about it, and they're almost playing defense. All these people are leaving the church, they're leaving faith, they need to stop deconstructing. And I think that's so destructive.
Yeah, hurtful.
Hurtful, because for one fact, these people that are deconstructing are probably spending more time in their Bible wrestling with these things than a lot of other people are. But even into the New Testament, just as plain as possible, letter from Jude near the end of our New Testament. It's not very long. It's like 3 tweets long. But he has this great line in the beginning there where he says this. He commands these early Jesus followers, be gentle to those who doubt. And the NLT says it this way, be merciful to those who have a weakened faith. So be merciful, be gentle to these people that are in this moment. Listen to them. There's things that we can learn together. You must show mercy to people whose faith is wavering, and don't play defense. God's bigger than your doubts and your questions. But let's just work together. Let's journey together to ask these questions, to wrestle with the text and wrestle with how this all works its way out. But overall, I'm encouraged. There's a lot of people in our faith community that are deconstructing and trying to, build back a faith that's more robust. I mean, one of the best illustrations I've ever heard for deconstruction comes from a friend and a mentor by the name of Ian Simpkins. You can follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow at Ian Simpkins. He says this, that deconstruction is getting an old house and peeling up the cheesy linoleum flooring and reconstructing, looking at the beautiful hardwood underneath. And so let's just get back to the source, ask great questions. I think it's a really helpful thing.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've talked about before too is, for me, there's a difference in deconstruction and then reconstruction, and not just deconstruction and then just wanting to burn the whole thing to the ground. And that's where I feel like the tension for me comes in with Abraham Piper, specific, is that I don't feel like he's deconstructing because he's not asking questions trying to kind of restore his faith or, learn more. He just, all of the videos that I have seen anyways, and I'm sure there are thousands that I have not seen, guaranteed, but it's more just trying to burn the whole thing to the ground and not necessarily reconstruct his faith. So for me, that's where the tension becomes in deconstructing, is ask all your questions, bring all your doubts to the table, but let's figure out how to reconstruct where you're at, and kind of restore your relationship. But yeah, I feel like for him, he's just a lot of times looking for an argument. Like I was telling you earlier, he, has videos about what's the right way to open a door and what size is the right label on an alcohol bottle and stuff like that. And so I'm like, okay, now you're just looking to bait me into an argument, for views on your social media, to build up your clout and da-da-da-da. So for me, I'm just like, bye.
Yeah.
It's one thing for your brand to be, I'm angry about everything. That's
yes.
on brand.
Yeah.
That seems what
yeah.
it is.
You're not, in that sense, you're not deconstructing.
He does have a chip on his shoulder. And you know what? He might have something that happened to him that we would all understand why he has that chip on his shoulder. But it is interesting that there's so much angst inside of it.
Yeah.
For sure. But what about you, Abby? How do you sort of have this conversation of deconstruction? Where do you see the value and the danger? How does it hit you?
I think it's so important to realize that there's a difference between, what the Bible is, what Jesus's word is, what he said, versus the church, the physical churches and stuff. There is so many differences sometimes where a church will try to get you to believe a certain way or interpret the scripture a certain way, and it can be harmful sometimes. And it's important for people to deconstruct, go back to the basics, go back to Jesus' word, and figure out, what they truly believe, and not just take, what they were taught growing up at face value. And I think it's important to have that. I also think it's important to not have this criticism towards deconstruction. I think it's a perfect time for churches to take this and realize what things they may have done wrong, what things they can do differently. And the criticism doesn't help. It doesn't make people want to reconstruct the faith if you're just going to criticize them for deconstructing in the first place.
Yeah, I think I have some friends that are walking through a season of deconstruction, they would call it. And, today they might not even know how to even explain what they believe. And I always find it helpful in those conversations just to ask questions about hey, why do you think that way? And, oh, that's interesting. Or think with empathy, oh, I'd probably see this the same way that you do if I had experienced
been what you have been through.
Been through. But oftentimes I find myself in these conversations when they explain to me why they feel like they can't believe in God or they can't follow Jesus, I'll be like, that God that you're describing, I don't believe in that God either.
Yeah.
Like that version of Jesus, that version of God that you're describing, man, I don't follow that God either. And I think it's really going to be an important conversation for the church, capital C, in the next 100 years to really understand that Christianity is a big tent, and there's people that see things and certain issues and doctrines differently. And it's not that those differences don't matter, but we need to like welcome people in and be like, hey, you don't have to agree with A, B, C, D, subpoint 1, 2, 3, all the way down the list before I can take communion with you and sing the hymn with you, sing the song with you, and worship with you, because it's a big tent, and we can believe differently and still be following Jesus on a lot of things. So I think that's an important step forward. And I'm sure this is a topic that we're going to talk about again and again on the podcast, and I hope so, because it really is a cultural moment that I think the church, we need to get right, and we need to humble ourselves and listen to those who are in a season of deconstruction.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about how Abraham Piper can get a little vulgar in his videos, so that's a great transition into our next subject, cussing.
Hey, so everybody, what's your favorite cuss word on the count of 3? Just kidding. We're not going to have to bleep anything.
I'd like to keep my job.
Right. We'll just reference the movie Elf, where he's like cotton-headed niggy muffins or something.
I'm a cotton-headed ninny muggins.
I don't even know what he says, but we're going to go with that.
Yeah. Okay, so this article is called Why Swearing is a Sign of Intelligence and Helps Manage Pain. This is a CNN article by Sandy Lamott. The article talks about the different benefits that cursing may have. It says that cursing may be a sign of intelligence, a sign of honesty. It improves pain tolerance. It's a sign of creativity, and it reduces physical violence. Now, the majority of Christians, myself included, are taught that swearing is bad and it's a sin. So many of us have found replacements for those 4-letter words. But are those really any different than the original words?
Oh, what a
Dun, dun, dun.
This is so interesting, like to think about, as adults and to think about, words. And, I've got 2 little ones at home, and having to really think about the words that we use around our house because our 3-year-old is starting to repeat everything, right? Cussing's funny for me. That's a funny sentence. But it's just a funny topic for me, because oftentimes I'll be someplace in public and just talking to somebody, and they're just letting all the words fly, and then it gets to that dreaded question of like, oh, so what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I don't want to tell them I'm a pastor. I want to do everything.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, then they like change. They apologize profusely. They start changing all the words. You know what I mean? And I'm like, most of the time I try to say, and it's true, just confessional here, but I'm like, hey, I've heard all the words, and I think I probably said them all too.
Yeah.
You're okay, man. I don't want this to be a shame-filled conversation for you. But the article was really fascinating, thinking about all the health benefits, and like you think about you hurt your hand, and that actually helps when you say that word maybe a little bit. But it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. One of the quotes from the article that I thought was interesting was it said, having the strategies to know where and when it's appropriate to swear and when it's not is a social cognitive skill, like picking the right clothes for the right occasion. That's a pretty sophisticated social tool. And I was like, I'm so sophisticated.
That's amazing.
Because I have never, I don't know about you guys, but I've never cursed in front of my parents. We don't curse in front of our kids. But that's not to say that I've never said any of the words, but it's just knowing your audience and your respect. Because, there's a lot of words that here in America are curse words, but internationally not curse words, not looked at the same way. And so for me anyways, words themselves are not deemed necessarily ungodly in the Bible, but the intent and the heart and kind of the cultural understanding behind them, for me, that's where, I don't know, words get their meaning and their value.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I'm really in that same direction of thinking. It's interesting though, growing up, in church, in evangelicalism, in a conservative church. I mean, I used to, hear the youth group messages where there would be 1 or 2 Bible verses about words.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh man, I can't. I would think that there's basically a list in the Bible of like
Yeah.
the 4-letter words that
Show
you
it
can't
to me.
say.
Yeah.
But you get older and you start to think of it more critically and ask questions about it. Like, man, you think like we're talking even the New Testament 2,000 years ago. Think of all the languages difference, all the difference in culture. I mean, there's no list of the same 4-letter words back then that there was today. So like any kind of stigma that we place on words as being, like dirty words, cuss words, it's a really new and culturally locked in a certain period of time conversation, right? Words that are bad today were not bad 500 years ago. I mean, English wasn't even, as easily spread as it was, 500 years ago. So like, that sort of changed some of my thinking. Like maybe it's not the power in the words. Maybe there's some more going on. And it's really interesting. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, one of those Bible verses that were used in all the youth group talks about don't cuss is Ephesians 4:29. And Paul's writing to this church in Ephesus. And he says this, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. There's like unwholesome talk. We think curse words, 4-letter words we're not supposed to say in front of our grandma. But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And it was interesting in my study, I looked at with that phrase unwholesome talk that I always, defined as cuss words. And unwholesome talk is actually in the original language, Greek. I'm probably pronouncing this completely wrong, but it's sapros logos. Sapros logos. And the word sapros there is the word, we translate to unwholesome. And it actually means rotten or, putrefied, like disgusting. Like think about like produce that's been sitting out way past its time and it's just rotten and it's putrid and there's bugs all in it. So the imagery that Paul is using is like something rotten that if you receive it and if you ingest it and digest it, it is going to harm the person who receives this food, this rotten food. And that's really what I think the thrust of what Paul's talking about is it's not the actual words and the syllables that you use that make the language a curse, but it's what it does to the person that hears it. It ruins their digestive system. It poisons them because it's rotten and putrid what they receive. And actually, Paul's logic continues right in that when he says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, so it may benefit those who listen. It's all about what it does to the other person that receives it. And so I think the intent behind our words is more important than the actual words that we use. I mean, for example, if I came into the office and I said, Abby, you are such an idiot. Did I say any cuss words?
Right.
Yeah.
Did I say any words there that I would get bleeped out?
Fired for, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but my intent was to cut down, was to belittle someone, dehumanize someone. And man, I think that God gets much more upset and he stands against that kind of thing much more than he does some friends that have a common understanding using some language that's not suitable on TV or radio. But in the same way, if I would use a 4-letter word in front of my mother or say it towards my mother, and if she is going to be dishonored or disrespected by hearing that word, then I'm still in the wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's
Still not
all
gonna
about
do it.
my heart, my intent, and it's about what it does to the other person. Is it sapros? Is it rotten? Is it putrid? And so I think we've got to be mindful, and this is the challenge and the beauty and the invitation of following Jesus is it's always thinking about what it does to another person. God cares about people. He cares about people. And so for us to use our language in a way that builds other people up and doesn't tear them down, dehumanize them, man, that is the challenge. It's not about not saying certain 4-letter words because these are the words that are off limits, even though they might be off limits if they dishonor people. But we're called to honor and see the image of God in everyone, and we need to honor other people. And that's what I think the thrust of the Bible's teaching of language is really all about.
Yeah, I really agree with what you said about intention. I mean, I talk a little bit about how we have those replacement words, but they all stem.
Dang it.
Yeah, they all
Crap.
stem from those cuss words.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen the video from Tim Hawkins, the Christian cuss words. He just lists off all these different, Christian replacements for cuss words.
Fiddlesticks, fiddle faddle flippin'. Horse hockey, horse pucky, horse feathers, horse patootie. Phooey, bull Twinkie, shut the front door. Okay. I didn't even know it was open.
And you listen to it, and they all are so very similar to those.
You know
that-
exactly what he's saying.
It is
Yeah.
flipping hilarious.
Yeah.
Flipping hilarious,
Yeah.
you guys.
Yeah, I'll link that video in the show notes. but-
Yeah, I think that's so true because we play games and it's like on today's episode of how dumb do we think God is? We
Right.
think that like,
Yeah.
you know,
He doesn't
like,
know what your
he doesn't
intent is,
the
yeah.
intention. And if you're doing that to belittle and to tear someone down, I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to take a quick break now and jump into our conversation with Derek. Just stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Well, I am so excited now because this is our very first interview,
Yeah.
and we're excited about that. We actually have one of my oldest friends in the world here with us, Derek Weed. Derek and I go way back. We met in high school through playing music. We were in a band together, the greatest band to ever play 2 shows, right? 2
They
shows.
were very well attended by extended family.
Yes. And then, we just walked with each other for a lot of life. And so always a great conversation. He has more useless music knowledge in his mind than I could ever dream to remember. And always a great conversation. I appreciate and love the way he thinks about the world and following Jesus. Derek, welcome to the Atypical Talk podcast.
I am excited to be here.
Yeah, great to have you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to jump in with our first question. The entire reason we have you here. What do you do for your career? And can you give an example about how you're helping people in your community with that career?
Yeah, so my title is financial advisor. I give financial advice.
I see what you did there. That's really creative.
Right. So that's, I'm being kitschy, but so there's some truth to that. So in our industry, historically that's meant, so like, does that mean you're like a stockbroker? Does that mean you're a product salesperson? Some people might get an image of like, I think Wall Street in the 1980s.
You're the wolf?
I am not the wolf. I don't have a gold Rolex and a pinstripe suit. That's not my style. But my specific job, like I'm compensated just to give financial advice. So I think about the type of clients that I would work with. It's anybody from people that are navigating complexity financially in their life or going through some level of transition. So often that might be retirement for certain people. Sometimes it's maybe having a child, maybe a child with special needs. Maybe it's a small business owner just trying to figure out how to be wise with their money. So that's what I do. I give financial advice. It could be investment related, could be budgeting related.
Yeah.
It could also be, I would say I work in the world of wealth management. So it's not just your checking account and how much you saving for the future. Some of it's tax planning. Some of it is also, estate planning, making sure that if something would happen to you, things are set up in a way that makes sense.
So how did you fall into this? Is this something that like young Derek was just dreaming about being a financial advisor? Like I'm kind of laughing because I know you've had a long road to get here, but how did you fall into this work and why do you have a passion tied to it?
I opened my first brokerage account at age 7 and was trading. No, I'm just kidding. I often joke, and I often say this was not an industry I ever imagined myself in. And I know you couldn't help but crack a smile when you asked the question because you probably wouldn't have imagined. Yeah. I did a lot of things as a younger man and played a lot of music and worked different jobs. But I would say after I got married and was actually working locally here in Indiana at Chrysler, like everybody in Kokomo does or has a relative that does,
Yeah.
right, at some point in their life. I was a 4th generation UAW worker, so I had to put some time in at the factory. But I had been praying and was actually at a church in Fishers at this point, but had been praying and thinking about, what do I want to do when I grow up, essentially. And this was when I was probably 25 or 26 years old. And I had a friend that said, hey, we're actually trying to hire a banker. I know that you have no experience in the world of business or in the world of investments or whatever you want to call it. But he spoke into me a bit and said, I know you love people, I know you love helping people, and that's really what this industry is all about. I had no framework for what that meant, because before I just was mainly interested in the things that I knew I was good at, which was really either music or some, creative endeavor in my mind. So I got hired at a bank and really, to my surprise, found out that I really enjoyed the financial services industry, specifically personal finance. I very early on at a bank, I was able to be in a conversation with a client that had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and hadn't really prepared for the end of life conversation and what the future should look like. And it was the first time I'd seen like somebody in the, I guess you'd say, business world really have an unbelievable impact on somebody's life, to the point that at the end of this conversation, the employee that the banker that was helping the individual got a letter from the person that had cancer that was like, hey, I just feel like I have so much more confidence in the future, and you've been a huge blessing to us. I just thought, wow, that was really powerful. So that started that was how I got into financial services. And then over the years, just kind of continued to work, found out I was interested in investments. It turns out when you have ADHD like I do and are have an attention capacity of a squirrel, the stock market is new every day.
Yeah.
There's always something new to look at and research.
Yeah, it's always moving.
It's always moving,
Yeah.
so it keeps my attention. And I found out that I was pretty interested in it. So kind of progressed through working and got some designations and passed some tests and all that.
I love that, because I think so often people think that there's this divide between sacred work and secular work.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are things like that are holy kind of things to do with your life and get paid, and then there's like everything else.
Right.
And I love that, walking into the industry of finance and thinking, oh, this is a way that I actually can serve people. I can actually leave them better. I can care for them. And I love that was something that tied you in. It wasn't just the gold Rolex. And you guys can't see Derek, but he's wearing 3 gold Rolexes right now.
3.
Not at all. But I love that so much because, I know this guy, and I know the way that, following Jesus is at the center of his life. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. You are a Jesus follower in a business, in a sector that isn't known for Jesus following. It's not known for upside down kingdom values. It's not really known for that. Now, do you see that as a perceived tension that you walk in, or do you see it as something more like a gift? How do you sort of walk into that realm being a Jesus follower?
So it can be both. So the tension would be, there is a uniqueness about the financial services sector. But I think there's a universality to the tension and the gift.
Oh, that's good.
So for example, and anybody that works in any job, even in ministry, I think on your worst day or the day that you're having a hard day at work or feeling like you're just not good at what you do, or you have imposter syndrome or whatever is driving your concern, you get these thoughts like, I just do X. I just accomplish X. So for me, I might think, well, man, on my worst day, I'm just helping people that are already wealthy, keep their wealth.
The rich get richer kind of
right,
thing. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the negative way. Yeah.
Exactly. And, for somebody that, I got into this industry wanting to feel like I'm making a difference, that's, I have to caution myself against reducing my job to that. But like I said, I think you can do that with any job. I mean, you can, I could think of any profession and make some sort of reductionistic statement and make it sound like it's something that it's not, right? But I would tend to lean towards it being a gift. And I think because maybe I never aspired to be a financial advisor, to work in wealth management because it fixed something in me or made me feel like I had arrived professionally. My first exposure to it was watching it impact other people. And so and again at that point, and Joel, you know this, I was really passionate and thinking about going into ministry. Like that was what I was, considering doing maybe with my life at that point. And it was just one of the ways the Lord kind of providentially and in His sovereignty was like, look, I want you to be helping people, serving people. It just may not be, like you said earlier, in the capacity in which you think maybe it is in business, the secular sacred divide. Did I say that right? Secular sacred divide. That's right. I think I mixed those words.
You're okay.
It isn't what we make it. But yeah, I think it's a gift because there's just such a need for good advice, specifically in the world of personal finance. The irony is, I don't think there's been I know there's never been a time in history where there's been more information that you could get. So like I could Google right now the answer to any number of financial questions, and probably find some good resources on it. But so much, I think the challenge for a person in America right now, or anybody, is figuring out, how, like, what applies to me. And when I look at my financial goals, my faith or my belief system, my values, and then the unique things about my family or my circumstances, how do I pick and choose between all of the financial strategies or ways to think about money? Like, what's right for me? And it's a gift because I feel like often when I'm working with people, so, I do work with Christians, which is a really fun conversation because, we're on the same...
You're looking at the world through the same lens.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully.
There's a shared language that exists. And so we can dream and scheme and think about ways to be wise with money. But it's also, for somebody that may not share my belief system is really a gift too, because there's a lot of wisdom, maybe just the common grace of good financial advice and just a life well lived that I feel like I can help people take a step towards healthiness, towards stability, towards generosity.
Yeah.
And those are all still, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
One step closer to that is a huge win.
And I love how you spoke to that, like sort of the common grace of just, good financial advice, like being that everybody wants to have more, resources than they do month and not be, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Everybody is at least, admires someone who's generous, and so they want to have generosity as part of their story, right? It doesn't matter if you are a Muslim, a Jew, and a nun, NONE either. Like, we all long for those kind of things, and I think some of the way of Jesus, when we loosen our grips on our stuff and the way that we think about not just satisfying our hunger and our appetite right now, but think about tomorrow and that kind of capacity of saving. These are universal things that speak to everybody. Andy Stanley, a pastor from Atlanta, says this often. He says that following Jesus will make your life better and it'll make you better at life. And I think that reality of like the way of Jesus has this effect of it's a life that works.
Right.
It's not void of challenge. It's not void of suffering, but it's a life of less pain and less self-inflicted issues.
Yeah,
right?
That's very well put.
Yeah, I love that.
So if you had someone come to you that they're a Jesus follower, they want to know more about stewardship, and they haven't planned out their financial future at all, what is one thing you'd want them to leave the conversation with you knowing and keeping in mind?
Yeah, so I think that often right belief precedes right action. So, like, it's really easy in finance, maybe more than most topics, to jump into practical advice right away. So, like, get a budget, meet with a financial professional, do X, Y, and Z. And those, so like, those are all good things. But I think that there's a lot of people that have not taken the time to develop a framework for what it means to be a Christian and have money, any amount of money. So I would say, like, if there's one thing I would want somebody to know, it's that, and I don't want to be too dramatic here, but like, you have the ability as a person with money to be a co-conspirator and in the inauguration of the kingdom of God, right? There's so many amazing things we can do with money. And I think often when we think about, how do I take my first step towards stewardship. Often it's negatively framed because people have anxiety about money. I mean, behavioral finance, I could talk about that for an hour.
Next time we have you on.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of things that are instilled in us, and maybe some of it's from the church, unfortunately, but I think that I would rather, instead of saying, look, you got to get your act together first before you can really do anything to change the world, I would say, no, let's take a step back and realize that in a way, positively stated, money is power. It's the power to create and to accomplish things and to change things. So what does that look like? Well, so part of maybe inaugurating the kingdom as a Christian might be doing something countercultural, like deciding to get a budget and change your framework on that. It's not this negative shame-based thing. It's like, no, I'm going to live like within my means, which is depending on the community that you're from, can be a really dramatic thing.
It probably is countercultural, just to live within your means, right?
Right. I mean, I'm thinking of there's an SNL skit years ago that was hilarious about not spending money you don't have. And the
fact that that's a skit on like a sketch humor show is the best.
Right. But it also, like, what are the things that show up on sketch humor shows? Like things that are true, we can joke about it because we all feel it to be true. So maybe part of that's getting a budget. Maybe part of that is trying to be wise and meeting with a financial professional. But I think about the way we use money is one of the most potentially everyday boring things that we don't think about that we could be revolutionary with. So part of that to me is not just trying to think about how we invest and what are my goals. Like those are all good conversations, but we were joking about watches. I think about this watch strap that I have on. I'm a consumer, like we all are, and in a capitalist society, or depending on where you're at in the world, in a capitalist world, you have the ability to spend money and send that to certain companies for goods. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways, like Lori and I, my wife, we love getting into this. So this watch strap, it's the Ukrainian flag. I know you can't see it, but I wanted a new watch strap, and I'm like, what kind of strap am I going to buy? Well, I found this individual that was doing a fundraiser for the Ukrainian Red Cross. All proceeds and profit were going to be donated to the Red Cross, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I have a choice now. Like as a consumer, I can either go on Amazon and buy something, which is fine, or I can decide to send my money towards something that matters and something that's inaugurating the kingdom, making the world a better place. And I will tell you, I mean, again, this is kind of a dumb example, but every time I look at this watch strap, I think, wow, I'm lucky. The world is a broken place. And it ends up sometimes in like a breath prayer, like, my Father, help those in the world that are, being
suffering. Right?
Yeah, that are suffering. So like I feel like I've essentially sacramentalized this real estate on my wrist. And you can do that with anything. I mean, you can do it with shoes, you can do it with glasses, you can do it with the type of vehicles you buy. So being like a conscientious consumer that wants to say, look, every time I spend money, I have the ability to change the world in some way by doing it. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So if you're new to Jesus, if you're new to faith, like, yes, I mean, there's a sense to where maybe you need to level up in your financial literacy and find some people around you that can help you do that. But also realize that right now, like the next thing that you buy, you can start changing the world with the money that you have.
I love that so much. I love this shift from kind of the shame-based, get your stuff together, get a plan, to be like, hey, like, this is an invitation to conspire with God and what he's doing in the world. And like you said, money is power. Money creates, and we get to create this world every day together. And so I think that's a powerful thought. So Derek, thank you so much for your time today. And I know I joked about it a little bit earlier, but we're going to have you back on to help us understand money, and you're our own personal wolf on Wall Street.
Oh boy. If the SEC is listening, that was a joke.
I love it. If we have the SEC listening, we're in real trouble. Anyway, thanks so much, man.
Yeah,
yep.
thank
Love
you.
you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions or topics that you'd like to hear us talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at atypicaltalkpod. Follow us at both those places to get updates about when there's new episodes and follow along there. You can also subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen on to get notified as well. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life.